New studies show people are as unhappy at work as ever. There's a new survey from BambooHR that shows their employee satisfaction score hit about 37 this summer. That number has fallen dramatically since the height of the pandemic.
So joining me now is CEO of BambooHR, Brad Rencher, to talk about what's going on. Here's the thing, Brad. I thought people were happy. Their employers asked them to come back to the office. They said no, and the employer said, fine, you can stay home, or we just need you to come in a couple times a month. Wages basically were really on fire for almost a year. I don't understand why people are so unhappy. What's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting, Anne-Marie and Vlad. It's a study that we've been doing really since January of 2020, shortly before the pandemic started. We polled 1,600 companies across the globe, and we actually collected about 1.4 billion data points of this. We call it the Employee Happiness Index. And what it showed is generally since January 2020 up until June, there's been a pretty steady decline in employee happiness. But what has really caught our eye is since January, the rate of decline of, I would say, this happiness index has increased by 15 times. While the happiness has decreased 16%, I mean, 15 times just since January. What's changed in 2023 that's causing this? This is one that we continue to double click into to understand.
So BambooHR survey, just so our audience understands, also shows the happiest industries, and the one that comes out on top is construction.
I know.
Yeah, and the unhappiest is healthcare.
Which is not that surprising.
That's not surprising
they've
at
been
all.
through it. Yeah.
So what does that tell you about what workers are looking for in their jobs? I mean, they're two very different industries. So I'm just wondering what kind of information you're able to glean from that.
Yeah, Vlad, I think that's right. Construction, you think about the story of construction over the last 3 years. Since January 2020, even with all the upheaval of the pandemic and the craziness that came around that, they really have had steady work. And they've had rising wages. The work environment has actually been good. And at the end of the day, we're builders. You can see as you build a building or a house, it's coming up out of the ground. So it helps tie the workers to the mission of what that organization's about. You contrast that with healthcare. You're right. Healthcare, we've seen a dramatic decline. And Anne-Marie, you said it's not that big of a surprise. Think back to January 2020 through March to June. The healthcare really got hit, staff shortages with all the things that were going on with COVID, and that has not abated. It's continued. And I think you combine that with some of the other things that are going on in and around the healthcare industry, and it's no surprise that there's some work to do in employee happiness in and around healthcare organizations.
I wouldn't be surprised if teaching also is sort of unhappy, because when I think about teaching and healthcare, these are like two areas where initially people during the pandemic, people were sort of so desperate for their help and appreciative. And then as the pandemic wore on, they suddenly became the target of people's frustration. And, not being appreciated can really have an impact on how you feel about your job.
It can have a tremendous impact, because I do think that's part of the story, Anne-Marie, in healthcare, is they were heroes, and they still are. But early in the pandemic, they were celebrated widely for their work. And I think that as that gets pulled back and you're like, wait, I'm still working as hard, but that appreciation isn't there. Mm-hmm. And that might change how you feel. And I think teachers, we did not poll the education industry, so we don't have data there. But I do think that is one of as we've looked at the data and the why behind that, appreciation and engagement is one of the most important things that indicate whether someone's going to be happy. It's important.
Really interesting. Brad Rencher, thank you very much.
Thank you.